Chapter 27. Bazarov's old parents were all the more overjoyed by their son's arrival, as it was quite unexpected. Arina Vlasievna was greatly excited, and kept running backwards and forwards in the house, so that Vasily Ivanovitch compared her to a hen partridge. The short tail of her abbreviated jacket did, in fact, give her something of a bird-like appearance. He himself merely growled and gnawed the amber mouthpiece of his pipe, or, clutching his neck with his fingers, turned his head round as though he were trying whether it were properly screwed on. Then all at once he opened his wide mouth and went off into a perfectly noiseless chuckle. "I've come to you for 6 whole weeks, Governor," Bazarov said to him. "I want to work, so please don't hinder me now." "You shall forget my face completely if you call that hindering you," answered Vasily Ivanovitch. He kept his promise. After installing his son as before in his study, he almost hid himself away from him, and he kept his wife from all superfluous demonstrations of tenderness. "On Enyusha's first visit, my dear soul," he said to her, "we bothered him a little. We must be wiser this time." Arina Vlasievna agreed with her husband, but that was small compensation since she saw her son only at meals, and was now absolutely afraid to address him. "Enyushenka," she would say sometimes, and before he had time to look round, she was nervously fingering the tassels of her reticule and faltering, never mind, I only—" And afterwards she would go to Vasily Ivanovitch and, her cheek in her hand, would consult him. "If you could only find out, darling, which Enyusha would like for dinner today, cabbage broth or beetroot soup. But why didn't you ask him yourself? Oh, he will get sick of me." Bazarov, however, soon ceased to shut himself up. The fever of work fell away and was replaced by dreary boredom or vague restlessness. A strange weariness began to show itself in all his movements. Even his walk, firm, bold, and strenuous, was changed. He gave up walking in solitude and began to seek society. He drank tea in the drawing-room, strolled about the kitchen garden with Vasily Ivanovitch, and smoked with him in silence. Once even asked after Father Alexei. Vasily Ivanovitch at first rejoiced at this change, but his joy was not long-lived. "Enyusha's breaking my heart," he complained in secret to his wife. "It's not that he's discontented or angry, that would be nothing. He's sad, he's sorrowful. That's what's so terrible. He's always silent. If he'd only abuse us. He's growing thin, he's lost his color." Mercy on us," whispered the old woman. "I would put an amulet on his neck, but of course he won't allow it." Vasily Ivanovitch several times attempted in the most circumspect manner to question Bazarov about his work, about his health, and about Arkady. But Bazarov's replies were reluctant and casual, and once noticing that his father was trying gradually to lead up to something in conversation, he said to him in a tone of vexation, "Why do you always seem to be walking round me on tiptoe? That way's worse than the old one." There, I meant nothing," poor Vasily Ivanovitch answered hurriedly. So his diplomatic hints remained fruitless. He hoped to awaken his son's sympathy one day by beginning apropos of the approaching emancipation of the peasantry to talk about progress, but the latter responded indifferently. "Yesterday I was walking under the fence, and I heard the peasant boys here, instead of some old ballad, bawling a street song. That's what progress is." Sometimes Bazarov went into the village, and in his usual bantering tone entered into conversation with some peasant. "Come," he would say to him, "expound your views on life to me, brother. You see, they say all the strength and future of Russia lies in your hands. A new epoch in history will be started by you. You give us our real language and our laws." The peasant either made no reply or articulated a few words of this sort. "Well, we'll try, because you see, to be sure." "You explain to me what your mere is," Bazarov interrupted. "And is it the same mere that is said to rest on 3 fishes?" "That, little father, is the earth that rests on 3 fishes," the peasant would declare soothingly in a kind of patriarchal, simple-hearted sing-song. "And over against ours, that's to say the mere, we know there's the master's will, wherefore you are our fathers. And the stricter the master's rule, the better for the peasant." After listening to such a reply one day, Bazarov shrugged his shoulders contemptuously and turned away, while the peasant sauntered slowly homewards. What was he talking about? Inquired another peasant of middle age and surly aspect, who at a distance from the door of his hut had been following his conversation with Bazarov. Arrears, eh? Arrears, no indeed, mate, answered the first peasant, and now there was no trace of patriarchal sing-song in his voice. On the contrary, there was a certain scornful gruffness to be heard in it. Oh, he clacked away about something or other, wanted to stretch his tongue a bit. Of course, he's a gentleman. What does he understand? What should he understand? Answered the other peasant, and jerking back their caps and pushing down their belts, they proceeded to deliberate upon their work and their wants. Alas! Bazarov, shrugging his shoulders contemptuously. Bazarov, who knew how to talk to peasants, as he had boasted in his dispute with Pavel Petrovitch, did not in his self-confidence even suspect that in their eyes he was all the while something of the nature of a buffooning clown. He found employment for himself at last, however. One day Vasily Ivanovitch bound up a peasant's wounded leg before him, but the old man's hands trembled, and he could not manage the bandages. His son helped him, and from time to time began to take a share in his practice, though at the same time he was constantly sneering, both at the remedies he himself advised, and at his father, who hastened to make use of them. But Bazarov's jeers did not in the least perturb Vasily Ivanovitch. They were positively a comfort to him. Holding his greasy dressing-gown across his stomach with 2 fingers and smoking his pipe, he used to listen with enjoyment to Bazarov, and the more malicious his sallies, the more good-humouredly did his delighted father chuckle, showing every one of his black teeth. He used even to repeat these sometimes flat or pointless retorts, and would, for instance, for several days constantly without rhyme or reason, reiterate, "Not a matter of the first importance," simply because his son, on hearing he was going to matins, had made use of that expression. "Thank God, he has got over his melancholy," he whispered to his wife. "How he gave it to me today, it was splendid." Moreover, the idea of having such an assistant excited him to ecstasy, filled him with pride. "Yes, yes," he would say to some peasant woman in a man's cloak and a cap shaped like a horn, as he handed her a bottle of Goulard's extract or a box of white ointment. "You ought to be thanking God, my good woman, every minute that my son is staying with me. You will be treated now by the most scientific, most modern method. Do you know what that means? The Emperor of the French, Napoleon even, has no better doctor." And the peasant woman, who had come to complain that she felt so sort of queer all over, the exact meaning of these words she was not able, however, herself to explain, merely bowed low and rummaged in her bosom, where 4 eggs lay tied up in the corner of a towel. Bazarov once even pulled out a tooth for a passing peddler of cloth, and though this tooth was an average specimen, Vasily Ivanovitch preserved it as a curiosity, and incessantly repeated, as he showed it to Father Alexei, "Just look, what a fang! The force Yevgeny has." The peddler seemed to leap into the air. If it had been an oak, he'd have rooted it up. "Most promising," Father Alexei would comment at last, not knowing what answer to make, and how to get rid of the ecstatic old man. One day a peasant from a neighboring village brought his brother to Vasily Ivanovitch, ill with typhus. The unhappy man, lying flat on a truss of straw, was dying. His body was covered with dark patches. He had long ago lost consciousness. Vasily Ivanovitch expressed his regret that no one had taken steps to procure medical aid sooner, and declared there was no hope. And, in fact, the peasant did not get his brother home again. He died in the cart. 3 days later, Bazarov came into his father's room and asked him if he had any caustic. "Yes." "What do you want it for?" "I must have some—" "To burn a cut." "For whom?" "For myself." "What, yourself? Why is that?" "What sort of a cut? Where is it?" "Look here, on my finger. I went today to the village, you know, where they brought that peasant with typhus fever. They were just going to open the body for some reason or other, and I've had no practice of that sort for a long while." "Well?" "Well, so I asked the district doctor about it, and so I dissected it." Vasily Ivanovitch all at once turned quite white, and without uttering a word, rushed to his study, from which he returned at once with a bit of caustic in his hand. Bazarov was about to take it and go away. "For mercy's sake," said Vasily Ivanovich, "let me do it myself." Bazarov smiled. "What a devoted practitioner. Don't laugh, please. Show me your finger. The cut is not a large one. Do I hurt? Press harder. Don't be afraid." Vasily Ivanovich stopped. "What do you think, Yevgeny? Wouldn't it be better to burn it with hot iron?" "That ought to have been done sooner. The caustic even is useless really now. If I've taken the infection, it's too late now." "How too late?" Vasily Ivanovich could scarcely articulate the words. "I should think so. It's more than 4 hours ago." Vasily Ivanovich burnt the cut a little more. But had the district doctor no caustic? No. How was that, good heavens? A doctor not have such an indispensable thing as that? "You should have seen his lancets," observed Bazarov as he walked away. Up till late that evening and all the following day, Vasily Ivanovich kept catching at every possible excuse to go into his son's room. And though far from referring to the cut, he even tried to talk about the most irrelevant subjects. He looked so persistently into his face and watched him in such trepidation that Bazarov lost patience and threatened to go away. Vasily Ivanovich gave him a promise not to bother him, the more readily as Arina Vlasievna, from whom, of course, he kept it all secret, was beginning to worry him as to why he did not sleep and what had come over him. For 2 whole days he held himself in, though he did not at all like the look of his son, whom he kept watching stealthily. But on the 3rd day, at dinner, he could bear it no longer. Bazarov sat with downcast looks and had not touched a single dish. "Why don't you eat, Yevgeny?" he inquired, putting on an expression of the most perfect carelessness. "The food, I think, is very nicely cooked." "I don't want anything, so I don't eat." "Have you no appetite? And your head?" he added timidly. "Does it ache?" "Yes, of course it aches." Arina Vlasievna sat up and was all alert. "Don't be angry, please, Yevgeny," continued Vasily Ivanovich. "Won't you let me feel your pulse?" Bazarov got up. "I can tell you without feeling my pulse, I'm feverish." "Has there been any shivering?" "Yes, there has been shivering too. I'll go and lie down, and you can send me some lime-flower tea. I must have caught cold." "To be sure, I heard you coughing last night," observed Arina Vlasievna. "I've caught cold," repeated Bazarov, and he went away. Arina Vlasievna busied herself about the preparation of the decoction of lime flowers, while Vasily Ivanovich went into the next room and clutched at his hair in silent desperation. Bazarov did not get up again that day and passed the whole night in heavy, half-unconscious torpor. At 1 o'clock in the morning, opening his eyes with an effort, he saw by the light of a lamp his father's pale face bending over him and told him to go away. The old man begged his pardon, but he quickly came back on tiptoe, and half hidden by the cupboard door, he gazed persistently at his son. Arina Vlasievna did not go to bed either, and leaving the study door just open a very little, she kept coming up to it to listen. How Enyusha was breathing, and to look at Vasily Ivanovich. She could see nothing but his motionless bent back, but even that afforded her some faint consolation. In the morning Bazarov tried to get up. He was seized with giddiness. His nose began to bleed. He lay down again. Vasily Ivanovich waited on him in silence. Arina Vlasievna went in to him and asked him how he was feeling. He answered, "Better," and turned to the wall. Vasily Ivanovich gesticulated at his wife with both hands. She bit her lips so as not to cry and went away. The whole house seemed suddenly darkened. Everyone looked gloomy. There was a strange hush. A shrill cock was carried away from the yard to the village, unable to comprehend why he should be treated so. Bazarov still lay, turned to the wall. Vasily Ivanovich tried to address him with various questions, but they fatigued Bazarov, and the old man sank into his armchair, motionless, only cracking his finger joints now and then. He went for a few minutes into the garden, stood there like a statue, as though overwhelmed with unutterable bewilderment. The expression of amazement never left his face all through, and went back again to his son, trying to avoid his wife's questions. She caught him by the arm at last, and passionately, almost menacingly said, "What is wrong with him?" Then he came to himself and forced himself to smile at her in reply. But to his own horror, instead of a smile, he found himself taken somehow by a fit of laughter. He had sent at daybreak for a doctor. He thought it necessary to inform his son of this, for fear he should be angry. Bazarov suddenly turned over on the sofa, bent a fixed, dull look on his father, and asked for drink. Vasily Ivanovitch gave him some water, and as he did so, felt his forehead. It seemed on fire. "Governor," began Bazarov in a slow, drowsy voice, "I'm in a bad way. I've got the infection, and in a few days you'll have to bury me." Vasily Ivanovitch staggered back as though someone had aimed a blow at his legs. "Yevgeny," he faltered, "what do you mean? God have mercy on you. You've caught cold." "Hush," Bazarov interposed deliberately. "A doctor can't be allowed to talk like that. There's every symptom of infection. You know yourself." "Where are the symptoms of infection, Yevgeny? Good heavens!" "What's this?" said Bazarov, and pulling up his shirt sleeve, he showed his father the ominous red patches coming out on his arm. Vasily Ivanovitch was shaking and chill with terror. "Supposing," he said at last, "even supposing, if even there's something like infection." "Pyemia," put in his son. "Well, well. Something of the epidemic." "Pyemia," Bazarov repeated sharply and distinctly. "Have you forgotten your textbooks? Well, well, as you like. Anyway, we will cure you. Come, that's humbug. But that's not the point. I didn't expect to die so soon. It's a most unpleasant incident, to tell the truth. You and Mother ought to make the most of your strong religious belief. Now's the time to put it to the test." He drank off a little water. "I want to ask you about one thing, while my head is still under my control. Tomorrow or next day, my brain, will send in its resignation. I'm not quite certain even now whether I'm expressing myself clearly. While I've been lying here, I've kept fancying red dogs were running round me, while you were making them point at me, as if I were a woodcock, just as if I were drunk. Do you understand me all right? I assure you, Yevgeny, you are talking perfectly correctly. All the better. You told me you'd sent for the doctor. You did that to comfort yourself. Comfort me, too. Send a messenger to Arkady Nikolaitch," put in the old man. "Who's Arkady Nikolaitch?" said Bazarov, as though in doubt. "Oh yes, that chicken." "No, let him alone. He's turned jackdaw now. Don't be surprised. That's not delirium yet. You send a messenger to Madame Odintsov, Anna Sergeyevna. She's a lady with an estate. Do you know?" Vasily Ivanovitch nodded. "Yevgeny Bazarov, say, sends his greetings and sends word he is dying. Will you do that?" "Yes, I will do it." "But is it a possible thing for you to die, Yevgeny? Think only. Where would divine justice be after that?" "I know nothing about that. Only you send the messenger." "I'll send this minute, and I'll write a letter myself." "No, why? Say I sent greetings. Nothing more is necessary. And now I'll go back to my dogs. Strange. I want to fix my thoughts on death, and nothing comes of it. I see a kind of blur, and nothing more." He turned painfully back to the wall again, while Vasily Ivanovitch went out of the study and, struggling as far as his wife's bedroom, simply dropped down onto his knees before the holy pictures. "Pray, Irina, pray for us," he moaned. "Our son is dying." The doctor, the same district doctor who had had no caustic, arrived, and after looking at the patient, advised them to persevere with a cooling treatment, and at that point said a few words of the chance of recovery. "Have you ever chanced to see people in my state not set off for Elysium?" asked Bazarov, and suddenly snatching the leg of a heavy table that stood near his sofa, he swung it round and pushed it away. There's strength, he murmured. "Everything's here still, and I must die. An old man at least has time to be weaned from life, but well, go and try to disprove death. Death will disprove you, and that's all. Who's crying there?" he added after a short pause. "Mother? Poor thing. Whom will she feed now with her exquisite beetroot soup? You, Vasily Ivanovitch, whimpering too, I do believe. Why, if Christianity's no help to you, be a philosopher, a stoic, or what not." "Why, didn't you boast you were a philosopher?" "Me a philosopher? wailed Vasily Ivanovich, while the tears fairly streamed down his cheeks. Bazarov got worse every hour. The progress of the disease was rapid, as is usually the way in cases of surgical poisoning. He still had not lost consciousness and understood what was said to him. He was still struggling. "I don't want to lose my wits," he muttered, clenching his fists. "What rot it all is." And at once he would say, "Come, take 10 from 8. What remains?" Vasily Ivanovich wandered about like one possessed, proposed first one remedy, then another, and ended by doing nothing but cover up his son's feet. Try cold pack, emetic, mustard plasters on the stomach, bleeding, he would murmur with an effort. The doctor, whom he had entreated to remain, agreed with him, ordered the patient lemonade to drink, and for himself asked for a pipe and something warming and strengthening, that's to say, brandy. Arina Vlasievna sat on a low stool near the door and only went out from time to pray. A few days before, a looking-glass had slipped out of her hands and been broken, and this she had always considered an omen of evil. Even Anfisushka could say nothing to her. Timofeich had gone off to Madame Odintsov's. The night passed badly for Bazarov. He was in the agonies of high fever. Towards morning he was a little easier. He asked for Arina Vlasievna to comb his hair, kissed her hand, and swallowed 2 gulps of tea. Vasily Ivanovich revived a little. "Thank God," he kept declaring, "the crisis is coming, the crisis is at hand." "There, to think now," murmured Bazarov, "what a word can do. He's found it, he's said crisis, and is comforted. It's an astounding thing how man believes in words. If he's told he's a fool, for instance, though he's not thrashed, he'll be wretched. Call him a clever fellow, and he'll be delighted if you go off without paying him." This little speech of Bazarov's, recalling his old retorts, moved Vasily Ivanovich greatly. "Bravo! Well said! Very good!" he cried, making as though he were clapping his hands. Bazarov smiled mournfully. "So what do you think?" he said. "Is the crisis over or coming?" "You are better, that's what I see. That's what rejoices me," answered Vasily Ivanovich. "Well, that's good. Rejoicings never come amiss. And to her, do you remember? Did you send?" "To be sure I did." The change for the better did not last long. The disease resumed its onslaughts. Vasily Ivanovich was sitting by Bazarov. It seemed as though the old man were tormented by some special anguish. He was several times on the point of speaking and could not. "Yevgeny," he brought out at last. "My son, my one, dear son." This unfamiliar mode of address produced an effect on Bazarov. He turned his head a little, and obviously trying to fight against the load of oblivion weighing upon him, he articulated, "What is it, father?" "Yevgeny," Vasily Ivanovich went on, and he fell on his knees before Bazarov, though the latter had closed his eyes and could not see him. "Yevgeny, you are better now. Please God, you will get well, but make use of this time, comfort your mother and me, perform the duty of a Christian. What it means for me to say this to you, it's awful, but still more awful. Forever and ever, Yevgeny. Think a little, what?" The old man's voice broke, and a strange look passed over his son's face, though he still lay with closed eyes. "I won't refuse, if that can be any comfort to you," he brought out at last. "But it seems to me there's no need to be in a hurry. You say yourself I am better." "Oh yes, Yevgeny, better certainly. But who knows? It is all in God's hands, and in doing the duty—" "No, I will wait a bit," broke in Bazarov. "I agree with you that the crisis has come. And if we're mistaken, well, they give the sacrament to men who are unconscious, you know. Yevgeny, I beg. I'll wait a little, and now I want to go to sleep. Don't disturb me." And he laid his head back on the pillow. The old man rose from his knees, sat down in the armchair, and clutching his beard, began biting his own fingers. The sound of a light carriage on springs, that sound which is peculiarly impressive in the wilds of the country, suddenly struck upon his hearing. Nearer and nearer rolled the light wheels. Now even the neighing of the horses could be heard. Vasily Ivanovich jumped up and ran to the little window. There drove into the courtyard of his little house a carriage with seats for 2, with 4 horses harnessed abreast. Without stopping to consider what it could mean, with a rush of a sort of senseless joy, he ran out onto the steps. A groom in livery was opening the carriage doors. A lady in a black veil and a black mantle was getting out of it. "I am Madame Odintsov," she said. "Yevgeny Vasilievich is still living. You are his father. I have a doctor with me." "Benefactress," cried Vasily Ivanovich, and snatching her hand, he pressed it convulsively to his lips, while the doctor brought by Anna Sergeyevna, a little man in spectacles, of German physiognomy, stepped very deliberately out of the carriage. "Still living, my Yevgeny is living, and now he will be saved. Wife, wife, an angel from heaven has come to us." "What does it mean, good Lord?" faltered the old woman, running out of the drawing-room, and, comprehending nothing, she fell on the spot in the passage at Anna Sergeyevna's feet, and began kissing her garments like a mad woman. "What are you doing?" protested Anna Sergeyevna, but Arina Vlasievna did not heed her, while Vasily Ivanovich could only repeat, "An angel, an angel." "Wo ist der Kranke, and where is the patient?" said the doctor at last, with some impatience. Vasily Ivanovich recovered himself. "Here, here, follow me, würdigster Herr Kollege," he added through old associations. "Ah," articulated the German, grinning sourly. Vasily Ivanovich led him into the study. "The doctor from Anna Sergeyevna Odintsov," he said, bending down quite to his son's ear, "and she herself is here." Bazarov suddenly opened his eyes. "What did you say?" "I say that Anna Sergeyevna is here and has brought this gentleman, a doctor, to you." Bazarov moved his eyes about him. "She is here. I want to see her." "You shall see her, Yevgeny, but first we must have a little talk with the doctor. I will tell him the whole history of your illness since Sidor Sidorich," this was the name of the district doctor, "has gone, and we will have a little consultation." Bazarov glanced at the German. "Well, talk away quickly, only not in Latin. You see, I know the meaning of Jam Moritur." "Der Herr scheint des Deutschen mächtig zu sein," began the new follower of Aesculapius, turning to Vasily Ivanovich. "Gabe, we had better speak Russian," said the old man. Ah, so that's how it is." To be sure, and the consultation began. Half an hour later, Anna Sergeyevna, conducted by Vasily Ivanovich, came into the study. The doctor had had time to whisper to her that it was hopeless even to think of the patient's recovery. She looked at Bazarov and stood still in the doorway, so greatly was she impressed by the inflamed and at the same time deathly face with its dim eyes fastened upon her. She felt simply dismayed, with a sort of cold and suffocating dismay. The thought that she would not have felt like that if she had really loved him flashed instantaneously through her brain. "Thanks," he said painfully. "I did not expect this. It's a deed of mercy, so we have seen each other again, as you promised." "Anna Sergeyevna has been so kind," began Vasily Ivanovich. "Father, leave us alone. Anna Sergeyevna, you will allow it, I fancy now?" With a motion of his head, he indicated his prostrate, helpless frame. Vasily Ivanovich went out. "Well, thanks," repeated Bazarov. "This is royally done. Monarchs, they say, visit the dying too. Yevgeny Vasilievich, I hope—" "Ah, Anna Sergeyevna, let us speak the truth. It's all over with me. I'm under the wheel. So it turns out that it was useless to think of the future. Death's an old joke, but it comes fresh to everyone. So far, I'm not afraid. But there, senselessness is coming, and then it's all up." He waved his hand feebly. "Well, what had I to say to you? I loved you. There was no sense in that even before, and less than ever now. Love is a form, and my own form is already breaking up. Better say how lovely you are. And now here you stand, so beautiful." Anna Sergeyevna gave an involuntary shudder. "Never mind, don't be uneasy. Sit down there. Don't come close to me. You know, my illness is catching." Anna Sergeyevna swiftly crossed the room and sat down in the armchair near the sofa on which Bazarov was lying. "Noble-hearted," he whispered. "Oh, how near, and how young, and fresh, and pure. In this loathsome room. Well, goodbye. Live long, That's the best of all, and make the most of it while there is time. You see what a hideous spectacle, the worm half crushed, but writhing still. And you see, I thought too. I'd break down so many things, I wouldn't die, why should I? There were problems to solve, and I was a giant. And now all the problem for the giant is how to die decently, though that makes no difference to anyone either. Never mind, I'm not going to turn tail. Bazarov was silent and began feeling with his hand for the glass. Anna Sergeyevna gave him some drink, not taking off her glove and drawing her breath timorously. You will forget me, he began again. The dead's no companion for the living. My father will tell you what a man Russia is losing. That's nonsense, but don't contradict the old man. Whatever toy will comfort the child, you know, and be kind to mother. People like them aren't to be found in your great world if you look by daylight with a candle. I was needed by Russia. No, it's clear, I wasn't needed. And who is needed? The shoemaker's needed, the tailor's needed, the butcher. Gives us meat. The butcher. Wait a little, I'm getting mixed. There's a forest here. Bazarov put his hand to his brow. Anna Sergeyevna bent down to him. Yevgeny Vasilievich, I am here. He at once took his hand away and raised himself. Goodbye, he said with sudden force, and his eyes gleamed with their last light. Goodbye. Listen. You know I didn't kiss you then. Breathe on the dying lamp and let it go out. Anna Sergeyevna put her lips to his forehead. Enough, he murmured, and dropped back onto the pillow. Now. Darkness. Anna Sergeyevna went softly out. Well? Vasily Ivanovich asked her in a whisper. He has fallen asleep, she answered, hardly audibly. Bazarov was not fated to awaken. Towards evening he sank into complete unconsciousness, and the following day he died. Father Alexei performed the last rites of religion over him. When they anointed him with the last unction, when the holy oil touched his breast, one eye opened, and it seemed as though at the sight of the priest in his vestments, the smoking censers, the light before the image, something like a shudder of horror passed over the death-stricken face. When at last he had breathed his last, and there arose a universal lamentation in the house, Vasily Ivanovich was seized by a sudden frenzy. I said I should rebel, he shrieked hoarsely, with his face inflamed and distorted, shaking his fist in the air as though threatening someone. And I rebel, I rebel. But Arina Vlasievna, all in tears, hung upon his neck, and both fell on their faces together. Side by side, Anfisushka related afterwards in the servants' room. They dropped their poor heads like lambs at noonday. But the heat of noonday passes, and evening comes and night. And then, too, the return to the kindly refuge, where sleep is sweet for the weary and heavy-laden. Chapter 28. 6 months had passed by. White winter had come with the cruel stillness of unclouded frosts, the thick-lying, crunching snow, the rosy rime on the trees, the pale emerald sky, the wreaths of smoke above the chimneys, the clouds of steam rushing out of the doors when they are opened for an instant, with the fresh faces that look stung by the cold and the hurrying trot of the chilled horses. A January day was drawing to its close, the cold evening was more keen than ever in the motionless air, and a lurid sunset was rapidly dying away. There were lights burning in the windows of the house at Mariino. Prokofitch, in a black frock coat and white gloves, with a special solemnity, laid the table for 7. A week before, in the small parish church, 2 weddings had taken place quietly and almost without witnesses, Arkady and Katya's, and Nikolai Petrovitch and Fenichka's. And on this day, Nikolai Petrovitch was giving a farewell dinner to his brother, who was going away to Moscow on business. Anna Sergeyevna had gone there also directly after the ceremony was over, after making very handsome presents to the young people. Precisely at 3 o'clock, they all gathered about the table. Mitya was placed there too. With him appeared a nurse in a cap of glazed brocade. Pavel Petrovitch took his seat between Katya and Fenichka. The husbands took their places beside their wives. Our friends had changed of late. They all seemed to have grown stronger and better looking. Only Pavel Petrovitch was thinner, which gave even more of an elegant and grand seigneur air to his expressive features. And Fenichka, too, was different. in a fresh silk gown, with a wide velvet headdress on her hair, with a gold chain round her neck. She sat with deprecating immobility, respectful towards herself and everything surrounding her, and smiled as though she would say, "I beg your pardon, I'm not to blame." And not she alone, all the others smiled and also seemed apologetic. They were all a little awkward, a little sorry, and in reality very happy. They all helped one another with humorous attentiveness, as though they had all agreed to rehearse a sort of artless farce. Katya was the most composed of all. She looked confidently about her, and it could be seen that Nikolai Petrovitch was already devotedly fond of her. At the end of dinner, he got up, and, his glass in his hand, turned to Pavel Petrovitch. "You are leaving us. You are leaving us, dear brother," he began. "Not for long, to be sure, but still I cannot help expressing how much we... There, the worst of it is, we don't know how to make speeches. Arkady, you speak." "No, Daddy, I've not prepared anything." "As though I were so well prepared." "Well, brother, I will simply say, let us embrace you, wish you all good luck, and come back to us as quickly as you can." Pavel Petrovitch exchanged kisses with everyone, of course not excluding Mitya. In Fenichka's case, he kissed also her hand, which she had not yet learned to offer properly, and drinking off the glass which had been filled again, he said with a deep sigh, "May you be happy, my friends. Farewell." This English finale passed unnoticed, but all were touched. "To the memory of Bazarov," Katya whispered in her husband's ear as she clinked glasses with him. Arkady pressed her hand warmly in response, but he did not venture to propose this toast aloud. The end, would it seem? But perhaps someone of our readers would care to know what each of the characters we have introduced is doing in the present, the actual present. We are ready to satisfy him. Anna Sergeyevna has recently made a marriage, not of love but of good sense, with one of the future leaders of Russia, a very clever man, a lawyer, possessed of vigorous practical sense, a strong will and remarkable fluency. Still young, good-natured and cold as ice. They live in the greatest harmony together, and will live perhaps to attain complete happiness. Perhaps love. The Princess K. is dead, forgotten the day of her death. The Kirsanovs, father and son, live at Mariinyu. Their fortunes are beginning to mend. Arkady has become zealous in the management of the estate, and the farm now yields a fairly good income. Nikolai Petrovitch has been made one of the mediators appointed to carry out the emancipation reforms, and works with all his energies. He is forever driving about over his district. Delivers long speeches. He maintains the opinion that the peasants ought to be brought to comprehend things. That is to say, they ought to be reduced to a state of quiescence by the constant repetition of the same words. And yet, to tell the truth, he does not give complete satisfaction either to the refined gentry who talk with chic or depression of the emancipation, pronouncing it as though it were French, nor of the uncultivated gentry who unceremoniously curse the damned emancipation. He is too soft-hearted for both sets. Katerina Sergeyevna has a son, little Nikolai, while Mitya runs about merrily and talks fluently. Fenichka, Fedosia Nikolaevna, after her husband and Mitya, adores no one so much as her daughter-in-law, and when the latter is at the piano, she would gladly spend the whole day at her side. A passing word of Pyotr. He has grown perfectly rigid with stupidity and dignity, but he too is married, and received a respectable dowry with his bride, the daughter of a market gardener of the town, who had refused two excellent suitors, only because they had no watch, while Pyotr had not only a watch, he had a pair of kid shoes. In the Brühl Terrace in Dresden, between 2 and 4 o'clock, the most fashionable time for walking, you may meet a man about 50, quite grey, and looking as though he suffered from gout, but still handsome, elegantly dressed, and with that special stamp which is only gained by moving a long time in the higher strata of society. That is Pavel Petrovitch. From Moscow, he went abroad for the sake of his health, and has settled for good at Dresden, where he associates most with English and Russian visitors. With English people, he behaves simply, almost modestly, but with dignity. They find him rather a bore, but respect him for being, as they say, a perfect gentleman. With Russians, he is more free and easy, gives vent to his spleen, and makes fun of himself and them, but that is done by him with great amiability, negligence, and propriety. He holds Slavophil views. It is well known that in the highest society this is regarded as très distingué. He reads nothing in Russian, but on his writing table there is a silver ashpan in the shape of a peasant's plaited shoe. He is much run after by our tourists. Matvey Ilyich Kolyazin, happening to be in temporary opposition, paid him a majestic visit, while the natives, with whom, however, he is very little seen, positively grovel before him. No one can so readily and quickly obtain a ticket for the court chapel, for the theatre, and such things as der Herr Baron von Kersenow. He does everything good-naturedly that he can. He still makes some little noise in the world. It is not for nothing that he was once a great society lion, but life is a burden to him, a heavier burden than he suspects himself. One need but glance at him in the Russian church, when, leaning against the wall on one side, he sinks into thought and remains long without stirring, bitterly compressing his lips, then suddenly recollects himself and begins almost imperceptibly crossing himself. Madame Kukshin too went abroad. She is in Heidelberg and is now studying not natural science but architecture, in which, according to her own account, she has discovered new laws. She still fraternizes with students, especially with the young Russians studying natural science and chemistry, with whom Heidelberg is crowded, and who, astounding the naive German professors at first by the soundness of their views of things, astound the same professors no less in the sequel by their complete inefficiency and absolute idleness. In company with 2 or 3 such young chemists, who don't know oxygen from nitrogen, but are filled with skepticism and self-conceit, and 2 with the great Elisievich, Sitnikov roams about Petersburg, also getting ready to be great, and in his own conviction continues the work of Bazarov. There is a story that someone recently gave him a beating, but he was avenged upon him. In an obscure little article, hidden in an obscure little journal, he has hinted that the man who beat him was a coward. He calls this irony. His father bullies him as before, while his wife regards him as a fool and a literary man. There is a small village graveyard in one of the remote corners of Russia. Like almost all our graveyards, it presents a wretched appearance. The ditches surrounding it have long been overgrown. The grey wooden crosses lie fallen and rotting under their once painted gables. The stone slabs are all displaced, as though someone were pushing them up from behind. 2 or 3 bare trees give a scanty shade. The sheep wander unchecked among the tombs. But among them is one untouched by man, untrampled by beast. Only the birds perch upon it and sing at daybreak. An iron railing runs round it. 2 young fir trees have been planted, one at each end. Yevgeny Bazarov is buried in this tomb. Often from the little village not far off, 2 quite feeble old people come to visit it, a husband and wife. Supporting one another, they move to it with heavy steps. They go up to the railing, fall down, and remain on their knees. And long and bitterly they weep, and yearn and intently gaze at the dumb stone under which their son is lying. They exchange some brief word, wipe away the dust from the stone, set straight a branch of a fir tree, and pray again, and cannot tear themselves from this place where they seem to be nearer to their son, to their memories of him. Can it be that their prayers, their tears are fruitless? Can it be that love, sacred, devoted love, is not all-powerful? Oh no! However passionate, sinning and rebellious the heart hidden in the tomb, the flowers growing over it peep serenely at us with their innocent eyes. They tell us not of eternal peace alone, of that great peace of indifferent nature. Tell us too of eternal reconciliation and of life without end.